Welcome to webinar 4 for the SIPS pd1 Leadership in Procurement and Supply, and in this session we're going to cover learning outcome 4, which is understand the main methods to lead change in the supply chain. The particular unit content details learning outcome 4.1, evaluate the main methods of change management that can be used to develop the supply chain. 4.2 is critically assess the main methods for resolving conflict with internal and external stakeholders to support change in the supply chain. And the final learning outcome 4.3, evaluate the importance of effective delegation to implement change successfully. So we're going to look at each of these in turn, and first look in more detail at 4.1, which is change management, and specifically the nature of organisational change, planned organisational change, dealing with resistance to change, and effective change management. So what is change? Change is coping process of moving from unsatisfactory present state to a desired state. Else why change? Why is it important to adapt and change, or adapt to change indeed? Individuals, teams, organisations that do not adapt to change in timely ways are unlikely to survive. And a very apt quote from Deming, it is not necessary to change, survival is not mandatory. So a useful citation there for you. What causes change, or what pushes us to change? Triggers: poor performance, the presence of entrepreneurs, new management, new approaches, changes or reordering of organisation goals, processes, structures, favourable changes from the past, and change in knowledge or resources can all lead to major changes in organisations. The study guide details 7 drivers of change, which really are not drivers but are steps in the process of successfully managing change, where we need to examine the external environment, look at the market requirements, decide the business imperatives and the organisation imperatives, the cultural imperatives from that, what leader and employee behaviour is required, and then the leader-employee mindset, which is what attitudes, beliefs and mental models will need to be developed to sustain the behavioural change. So a big process there. There are types of change. The study guide and the unit content talk about several types of change. We can have change that just happens, it emerges, it develops naturally. Or we can have a very formal planned change which involves deliberately formulated strategies and programs for implementing change. We can classify types of change further, and a useful framework is from Balogun and hailey, who says change can be analysed in terms of the speed of change, incremental slow change, or big bang change, which is obviously fast change, and the extent of the change can be a complete transformation versus realignment. So we've got 4 different types there. Evolution, which is incremental transformation change. We can have adaptation, which is a realignment, which is again is incremental. Or we can have big bang, which is a revolutionary change. It can be reconstruction. So more terminology. Incremental change or evolutionary change, which links to the last slide, is often used as a proactive approach building from existing improvement strategies such as Kaizen or TQM, and it only requires small operational improvements and elimination of waste. It can be implemented from bottom up, involving employers through suggestion schemes, quality circles or self-improvement plans. At the other extreme, we've got transformational or revolutionary change, which is often reactive, responding to disruptive change, a crisis or the need for a new paradigm. It seeks to overthrow the status quo and introduce radical transformation in a relatively short period of time. Because it requires discontinuous and sweeping changes across the organisation's structures and systems, it can only be implemented from the top down with top management vision and leadership. Will require heavy investment, there's some risk, and it can achieve breakthrough transformative improvements. Strategies that link to this for incremental change, we perhaps might use a collaborative consultative style, but we could use directive and coercive, but that may be more suitable for transformational change. So we've got two different styles there that could be applied for incremental change and for transformational change, and it gives you some details when each may be used. When is conditions favourable for a change to happen in an organisation? Well, it's perhaps better if the company is financially viable and stable, that it's got an adaptable or organic organisational structure, it's got good multi-directional communication systems, it's got vision, leadership and support from senior management, good supporting HR systems, and a supportive culture and attitudes. They're all favourable conditions for a change to be carried out or succeed. What affects the change? Well, the change kaleidoscope was developed by Balogun, and Hailey, and it sets the context of what impacts upon the change. The power structures, the time, how quickly the change is needed, the scope of the change, the readiness of the organisation for the change, the degree of change, the capability of the management and personnel, diversity of staff groups, and preservation are all factors that are influential and contextual to the change. So all change is different, and these are 8 factors that Balogun, and Hailey identified. It was a kaleidoscope because originally the diagram in the original work looked like this, where we've got the design choices in the middle, the context in the next circle, which is power, time, scope, preservation, etc. And then we've got the external environment, the context in the outer ring. The first of our change models then, a very well known one from Lewins, which is force field analysis. This is a very useful model, and it provides an initial view of the change problems that need to be tackled, and it involves analysing the forces that drive the change and also the forces that restrain it. So we firstly identify the driving forces that are pushing for the change, and we also identify the resistance forces, factors that exert pressure to continue as we are and therefore resist new action. The diagram is usually depicted like this. It can be a vertical or horizontal line, but this shows the current state where there is driving forces for change, such as a requirement for new legislation, professional commitment to controlling the organisation, requirement to report to external agencies, and on the right hand side we've got the restraining forces that are resisting the change, and the dotted line is where we would like the organisation to be. So we need to allow the change to take place by reducing the resisting forces and letting the change move across, lock it into position, and enforce the change in that manner. So it is a very useful tool, this force field analysis. Will the change take place? Well, Beckard and Harris say change is possible if D times V times F is greater than R, and D is how dissatisfied you are with the current status quo, V is have you got a clear vision of what's possible in the future, and F, have you got achievable first step plans that will help you reach the vision, and R is resistance. So a very simple formula, D times V times F must be greater than the resistance. Change objectives need to be aligned, integrated, within the organisation, both vertically and horizontally. They must be effectively formulated. They should be formulated preferably with participation or at least agreement of key stakeholders, and there is a need for them to be flexible. We might need to consult and engage initially with the key stakeholders to allow their views to be taken into account, to develop the change objectives which are acceptable, to ensure accountability, to enhance the quality of change plans, to provide issues management, and to provide for crisis management. So a very important part of the change process could be consultation and engagement. Factors that affect responsive to change. There are many issues here. The actual facts, what is known about the reasons for change, the change process and likely outcomes, beliefs, whether individuals believe the change is necessary, feelings, emotional responses, and finally values, the individual's positive and negative moral judgments around the change. So there's some general high-level issues about factors that affect the response to change. A very, very useful revision slide here is reasons for resistance to change, and this has been asked in several past exams. So there can be individual resistance through selective perception leading to biased views, habit providing ease, comfort and security, inconvenience, loss of control or reduced freedom of action. Very serious one, economic implications of the change in regard to pay, rewards and job security. Nostalgia, we've always done it this way. And fear of the unknown and insecurity. So we've got 6 very good reasons for resistance that can be cited in your exam, and then there can be organisational reasons why change is resisted. Because of the culture, a desire to maintain stability and predictability, resource requirements and priorities, past and existing contracts might tie companies in and limit the amount of change, threats to the power or influence of interest groups, and there might be a blaming culture. So just to reiterate, a very useful revision slide there. How do we deal with resistance? Well, there are several theories and models, but I think the best one which should suit most typical exam questions would be the one based on the work of Kotter and Schlesinger in 2008, who've come out with a list of methods going from education right through to explicit coercion. So they move from pull tactics right through to push. Very much at the top is carrot and then stick. So these are very, very important. Education and communication, promoting reasons and benefits of the change, sharing the management perspectives with relevant stakeholders and factual information. We can use facilitation and support, reassuring those affected by the change they'll be helped to develop the skills required to implement the change. However, this may be time consuming. We can use participation and involvement, encouraging stakeholders to own the changes. We can use negotiation and agreement. And then finally the quite coercive methods, manipulation and cooptation, and explicit and implicit coercion. And we'll look at these again in a second. So with manipulation and cooptation, resistors are neutralised by co-opting them into the process, effectively making them part of the change team. Although this may cause discomfort to those involved, it may shift their view to that of the organisation. And the final method is explicit and implicit coercion, and it's very much the last resort if other methods fail, and it involves people told exactly what the implications of resisting change will be. Implicit coercion involves suggesting negative consequences for the business of failing to change without making explicit threats. The big issue with using coercion is it almost inevitably damages trust between the people and the business and can lead to damaged morale. So very, very important methods of dealing with resistance. The methods of dealing with resistance, there's a useful summary here from the Harvard Business Review article, Choosing Strategies for Change, which details each of the 6 approaches and gives a suggestion when each might be used and advantages and disadvantages of each method. So this is a very useful revision slide, and it's one you would need to become familiar with. Plan change results from deliberate attempts by managers to improve organisational operation, and managing the plan change process will improve the organisation's ability to cope with unplanned changes that are thrust upon them, and also help modify employees' attitudes and behaviours to make them more effective contributors to the organisation's goals. Initiating the plan change process then, how do we generally start? Well, nearly all the models and methods start with some diagnosis, recognise the need for change, diagnose and plan the change. We need to formulate goals, determine the stakeholder needs, and examine driving and restraining forces. So the plan change, for example, could be the introduction of category management, and we would need to consider all those parts of the process. A very important model then for your studies is the Lewin 3-step model, which is a planned change model, and there are 3 basic phases or steps, where 1, we unfreeze the existing behaviour, 2, we change the attitude and behaviour, and 3, we try and refreeze the new behaviour into the culture, structure and way of working. And on the diagram there you can see a big cube of ice being melted into a new into a fluid pool and then reshaped into a cone shaped where it's frozen back in. So that's the analogy. What you need to understand is how you unfreeze, how you change, and what you do to refreeze. So you need to be able to articulate these steps that are detailed in the diagram. The unfreezing involves determining what needs to change, ensuring strong support, creating a sense of urgency, the need to change, and manage and understand the doubts and concerns that people will have. Then you need to institute the change by communication, dispelling rumours, empower action, and involve people in the process. And then we need to anchor it, freeze it. So we need to anchor the changes, develop ways to sustain the change, provide support and training, and celebrate success. So a very, very important model of change. The variation on this, which is adapted from the work of French Cast and Rosenzweig, is where there are 8 stages from problem identification through to learning from the process, and these can be equated to the Lewin 3-stage model. The unfreezing is stages 1 to 3. There is a little bit of overlap here. The movement can be 2 to 7, or the change, and the refreezing can be steps 7 and 8 there. So 8 stages is useful there, that equate to that. The other very important model is one of my favourites, and an examiner's favourite, is the transformational change model by Kotter, which is 8 steps. Step 1 is establish a sense of urgency and prioritise change objectives. Step 2, you need to form a guiding coalition of influential stakeholders, get a team together, get them on board and make sure they're influential. Create a vision for the change, which is compelling. Communicate this vision widely, clearly. Empower people to act on the vision. Plan to create short-term wins. Take the low-hanging fruit. Consolidate improvements to produce further change. And go back to the start. Sorry, after institutionalising the new approaches. So 8-step process there. Very, very important. Now comparing the theories of Kurt Lewin and John Kotter, we can clearly see there are some. I think this is a very useful slide which shows how the Kotter 8-step model can be clearly linked to the Kurt Lewin 3-step model. So the unfreeze is Kotter's 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, the change is the 5, 6, 7, and the refreeze is the number 8. And I would suggest the Kotter and the Kurt Lewin theories of change management are the two essential theories for your studies. We might bring change agents in, external people, to bring about the change. They're more likely to be objective, dispassionate. They may better represent the interests of other stakeholders. They are better able to ask questions and perform analysis which challenge the status quo. They may bring expertise which perhaps isn't there in-house. They're dedicated to the change programme, it's their job, and they represent a significant focused investment in the change. Often the external change agent can be a new chairman, it could be a new director, or it could indeed be someone who's just employed to bring about the change, possibly management consultants. So what are the skills and attributes of an effective change agent? They need vision, team building skills, interpersonal skills, personal flexibility, and above all commitment, perseverance and stamina. We move now on to 4.2, which are the main methods for resolving conflict with internal and external stakeholders to support change. So the indicative content covers the functions of informal organisations, positive and negative outcomes of conflict, and strategies for resolving. Contingency models of organisations is a development of the systems approach. It takes a view there is no one best structure, and a range of situational factors influence design and performance, with the emphasis on the need for flexibility. And if you look at learning outcome 1, the Hershey Blanchard model or the House model of contingency management could be useful here. Informal organisation is the social network of groups cutting across boundaries and units established by the formal organisation. There are informal ways of getting things done, often different than formal rules. There are informal communication networks, often bypassing formal communication channels. Perhaps we could call that the grapevine. There are informal power structures, and there are personal and collective values, feelings and behaviour norms, all associated with the informal organisation. What are the functions of informal organisation? Well, they help satisfy social needs of the members, motivating factors to enhance job satisfaction, sources of information valued or required by members, stability, confidence, mechanisms of social and cultural control, and solutions or workarounds for performance barriers, inefficiencies or lack of resources. So some very important functions there. Political strategies can be about contracting, co-opting, forming networks, influencing decision criteria, controlling information, coercion and pressure tactics, and rule making. These would all come under the umbrella heading of organisational political strategies. Conflict then could be task, could be relationships, or it could be about the process. Now, the old view of conflict always that it was negative and should be avoided. The more modern take is that there are positive and negative functions of conflict. Positive outcomes of conflicts: it introduces different options and solutions. It helps define power relationships, encourages creativity, testing of ideas, focuses attention on individual contributions, brings emotions into the open, and it provides opportunities for letting off steam. But there are obvious negative outcomes: distracting attention from the task, polarising views and perhaps dislocate a group or team, suboptimal decisions, defensive spoiling behaviour, disintegration of group cohesion, could be a barrier to communication, and it could lead to hostility and win-lose conflicts. So that's again a useful slide that gives you a good overview of the main positives and negatives of conflict. What causes conflict? Interdependence, shared resources, difference in goals, values, perceptions, power imbalance, ambiguity. So 4 key sources there. Mullins comes up with a similar list: differences in perception, limited resources, specialisation, the actual nature of the work, role conflict, inequitable treatment, violation of territory, and environmental change. All causes there. We can get intergroup conflict, which is institutionalised conflict, hierarchy-based, functional, line, formal, status, resource and political. And we can have intra-group conflict, disagreement about needs, poor communication, competition for scarce resources, interpersonal issues and hygiene issues. So intra means within your own organisation. How do we resolve conflict? Well, Robbins has come up with several methods: problem solving, subordinate goals, looking at the bigger picture, expansion of resources, where additional resources will be freed and mobilised to reduce conflict. We might try and avoid as a strategy. We might use smoothing, where both parties play down their differences and attempt to paper over cracks. We might use compromise, which is a process of bargaining. We could use authoritative command, where an arbitrator or someone with authority over both parties would intervene and impose a solution. We might alter the human variables, where an attempt is made to alter attitudes, beliefs and perceptions. We could try altering the structural variables, where we try to reorganise structures to minimise conflict. We could try and improve communication. We could bring in outsiders, and we could try restructuring the organisation. These are even appoint a devil's advocate, which is someone who takes a viewpoint which is deliberately provocative in the hope of stirring up debate and people looking at it from a different point of view. And this is based on the work of Robbins, Managing Organisational Conflict. So some very, very important strategies for resolving conflict, and you would need to be able to cite Robbins or the work of Thomas Kilmann, which we're going to look at in a moment. So strategies for resolving conflict. The other very well known method, which you should have studied at level 5 and even level 4, are the different 5 styles from Thomas Kilmann's conflict handling instrument. And Thomas Kilmann came up with a view that there are 5 different strategies to resolve conflict, depending on your own attempt to satisfy your own concerns versus attempt to satisfy others, which is the importance of the relationship versus importance of the issue. And there are 5 strategies there. Each person or each manager will have a preferred conflict handling style, but there may be a case where they don't use their preferred style, they use a style that's suitable for the conflict in question. And a summary there of the 5 styles: avoiding is exactly what it says, forcing, competing is imposing the solution, is assertive, uncooperative, and an individual pursues his own concerns at the other person's expense. Accommodating is you concede without a fight. Compromising, use bargaining or negotiation. And collaborating, you work closely together to find an outcome which meets the clearly stated need. And there's a useful slide here which looks at each of the 5 styles and suggests when each might be usefully incorporated to solve conflict. So competing is when you want quick decisive action. Collaborating when your objective is to learn or test assumptions, perhaps where you've got strategic items that you're purchasing. Compromising when 2 opponents with equal power are committed to mutually exclusive goals. Avoiding might be used when they believe there's more important issues. And finally we've got accommodating when the issue is more important to others than to you. So that's a useful summary. You could also use the win-win approach from your level 4 negotiation. So Urey and Fisher, step 1, find out what each party needs, what they say they want, find out where the differences dovetail, design new options, and cooperate, treat the person as a partner. And going back to step 1, it's really not saying what they want, is what they need. Right, moving on to 4.3. What's the importance of delegation in implementing change? How much help is delegation in getting change successfully through an organisation? Well, we can delegate. We need to understand authority, responsibility and accountability. We need to know the benefits. We need to know how to apply a systematic approach to delegation, and we need to understand the concept of empowerment. So I've got some basic definitions here of responsibility and accountability, and we've also got one there for authority, the right to take action and decisions. Responsibility is the obligation of an individual to use the authority assigned to him or her. And accountability is the liability of each person who is given authority to give an account or report of their use of that authority to the person who assigned it to them. Forms of control: we can have direct control, control through standardisation. We can have control through influencing, and that's from the work of Stewart. So 3 main forms of control which can be used. Delegation, here we've got a useful slide from Mullins which shows really the difference between authority, responsibility and accountability. We've got the manager's superior who is ultimately responsible, so accountability is seeing the job gets done. The manager can take actions which impact on the subordinates. So at the individual or personal level, delegation is a process of entrusting authority and responsibility to others throughout the various levels of the organisation. Why do we delegate? Well, the manager can't do everything. Make better use of the time. It can be used to help train and develop staff, to encourage us development of knowledge and skills. We might have to delegate simply because of geographical location, and it makes sound economics. Improves the strengths of the workforce. The stages of delegation, there are several models around. This one is a 6 stage one from Mullins: clarification of objectives, agreement of terms of reference, guidance, support, training, agreement on monitoring review procedures, then allow the subordinates the freedom of action within the terms of reference, and have a related reward system. SIPS shows this as a 7-step process, very similar to the Mullins: specify tasks, specify authority, check, agree, step back, support, review. So perhaps the cyclical process here is slightly more realistic than the linear Mullins one on the previous slide. We need to have a balance obviously between delegation and control, and getting that balance right is very difficult, and this is a useful slide for summarising the issues involved when we're trying to get the balance between these two correct. Core job dimensions are mentioned here, which are the work of Hackman and Oldham, which ultimately impact on job satisfaction, and empowerment, delegation are obviously related to job satisfaction. So whether people are satisfied in their job depends on the meaningfulness of work, the responsibility, which is linked to autonomy, the opportunity to exercise discretion or self-management, and they also need knowledge of outcomes, so they need feedback. So job satisfaction, these are the core job dimensions which ultimately impact on how satisfied people are in their work. Key points about delegation: we need to ensure stakeholders are given genuine involvement, that we aren't playing at it. Delegation is part to facilitate and empower style of leadership which might be less aversive than command and control. And it ensures no individual manager has responsibility for the management of more stakeholders and programme elements than they can effectively handle, hopefully. Delegation supports the allocation of authority for stakeholder engagement, and by increasing team members' understanding, engagement and initiative in the change process and increasing multidirectional communication around the change, delegation can encourage innovative problem solving and improvements. So some key benefits there of delegation. Encouraging managers to delegate. How do we do it? You must have all worked for managers who won't let go. Well, we need to train managers. So we need senior management model of effective delegation, recognising and rewarding positive and effective delegation, and we need increasing trust. Again, a slide here linked to worker satisfaction, job rotation, job enlargement and job enrichment are all part of what we've on the level 5 we would have termed activation theory, but in essence job rotation, job enlargement and job enrichment are very much related to the work of Hertzberg. Related to empowerment then is the view that the organisation, perhaps in its traditional view, is not suitable now in the modern age of rapid change and increasing accountability. We can look at it that it should be more customer facing, and we should empower people who are at the front to make decisions, and top management there should be for guidance. So one view of the modern organisation. Empowerment as a definition: greater freedom, autonomy, self-control, and can be succinctly defined as authority of subordinates to decide and act. So how does it enhance effectiveness? Well, it improves their motivation. It harnesses creativity and frontline expertise, and it shortens response times at the interface with customers and suppliers in regard to improving customer service. So if you link back to the inverted organisation, that very much explains that concept. But there are drawbacks: loss of control, stress, conflict. Not everyone wants more challenge. Not all are capable of exercising greater responsibility. Managers struggle to release control. The culture of the organisation can be a problem. It's not a substitute for other rewards. You still want salary, bonuses. Empowerment may be perceived as a poor alternative promotion, and it can't be simply implemented. It needs developing. So you have to be very careful. And some notes here, just some extra reading. So the meaning of delegation of authority and some principles of delegation of authority. So this is the last slide in this presentation, and we'll just do a quick recap. We've looked at types of change from incremental to transformational. We've looked at the Lewin force field analysis model. We've looked at Lewins' 3-step process of managing change, which is unfreeze, change, refreeze. We've looked at a very useful Kotter's 8-step change management process. We've looked at Kotter and Schlesinger's 6 steps to overcome resistance. We've then moved on to how to resolve conflicts, and we've got Robbins, who's proposed several methods, and we've also got the well-known Thomas Kilmann 5 styles of managing conflict. We've then looked at Mullins' 6-step model of delegation and a very similar SIP's 7 stages of delegation. And that is a summary of the main theories. So we'll be doing a revision session next on this, so we'll cover learning outcome 1, 2, 3 and 4 and some key exam technique, some revision of some exam questions, and hopefully you'll be well prepared for your exams.